It is good to be here, and it is not good that I chose this topic because, boy, is it evocative. I just was sitting Sunday thinking about various options of topics to discuss, and yeah, we spoke about forgiveness in a more generic term a few weeks ago, and it got a lot of response. So I said to myself, oh, come on, I'm sure you could give a lecture about forgiving dysfunctional parents in theory. And it's been quite a ride, whether private messages or on Facebook. It struck a chord. It's deep. What I mean, it's deep. I remember hearing an expression from somebody once. They said that the deepest parts about you are what you share in common with others. Think about that. In other words, most of the stuff that we hold deeply secret, our deep hurts, our deep, deep feelings, are often the stuff that if the other person opened their deep feelings, you would also discover that within them. It's almost like our deepest hurts is what we have in common. But that rule has exceptions. Obviously, not every person goes through the same hurt. Although emotions are emotions, and regardless of the hurt, certain emotions are evoked, whether it's shame, it might be more intense through one act of abuse than the other, worthlessness, unworthy of love, unrespected, broken. And each emotion that a person goes through in their life and each journey that they go through forms them into the person they are. And that hurt is tremendous. That hurt is tremendous. And I think before I go and get esoteric about this, which I'm not going, although I prepared a PowerPoint, I'll stay mostly face-to-face. I'll only go on the PowerPoint when necessary just to bring out a point. And that's because I want it to be a conversation. I find that sometimes when you hide behind the PowerPoint, the conversation element's lost. So at least over here, I'm talking. You can see my face. And I'm imagining I'm seeing your face. And I'm coming and saying before anything, if I'm talking to a person who was hurt by their parents, I don't judge you, not remotely. I don't have the right to judge you. I don't have the shoes to stand in to judge, and no one's telling anybody what to do. So let me be clear that before we start, the question of the lecture, must I forgive any? You don't mustn't anything. I don't tell people what they must do or mustn't do. It was just a good title to hopefully get the interest. But I don't tell people what to do. That's not my rule of thumb. What we're going to do tonight is explore Jewish wisdom on forgiveness. And what you might think that, okay, I know what this rabbi is going to say. He's going to say forgive, even if my parent abused me physically, emotionally, sexually. He's going to tell me forgive. No, that's not what I'm going to say. It's much more nuanced than that. If it was a 1-minute speech, I would just send it to you in a 1-minute voice note. It's nuanced, like everything in life. And by the way, that's the difference between a short speech and a long speech, a vart and a shiur. A vart is when you don't get to bring any subtlety to your statement. You just say it. 2 minutes, sound bite, evocative, leave. A shiur, when we have 45 minutes, an hour together, it allows us to explore in a more subtle, nuanced, multifaceted way some of these truths. So let's really explore together some of the Jewish wisdom about this. Here we go. As I said, there's limits to this shiur. We're going to start with a story from a guy from Ashkelon. It is fascinating that both in the Babylonian Talmud, in Jerusalem Talmud, and in Medrash, in almost all the foundational books of the oral of Judaism, the same story is told, various versions. Interesting. It's the same story about a non-Jew. When the Torah is trying to describe to you how much you have to honor your parents, they all bring the example from the same fella, Dama, the son of Nesina. Who is this Dama? Who's the son of Nesina? What happened? So there are many stories told about him. There's a story about how he didn't wake his father up, even though there was a great business opportunity. That's not the story I'm talking about, although that's the famous story. If you Google Dama, the son of Nesina, that story will come up first. But there's a smaller story, and I'll read it to you in the Hebrew. This is from the Jerusalem Talmud. Ad heichan hu kibud ava'im. Until where? How far is the mitzvah of respecting your father and mother? So the wise sage turns to them and says, V'li atem sha'alim, are you asking me? Basically, the students ask the rabbi in yeshiva, how much do I have to respect my parents? He says, you're asking me, L'chu sha'alu Dama ben Nesina. Go ask this question to Dama, the son of Nesina, a non-Jew. Dama ben Nesina Rosh Peter Kulei Hava. Dama ben Nesina was a very prestigious mayor in the city of Ashkelon, which is south of Israel. And here's the story, 2 lines. Hamachat, one time, Haita imo misatarta, his mother was hitting him. Lifnei kuli shelo, in front of his entire office, in front of all his people, all the dignitaries. V'nafal kurdesin shalom yada, and her stick that she was hitting him with, fell from her hand. V'hoshitla, he picked it up and gave it back to her, kedei shaloi titztar, that she should not have pain. Wow. That's quite a story to start with, okay? Dama, the son of Nesina, when the rabbis are looking for the ultimate example of somebody who respects parents, we'll find an example of a fella who's a dignitary, whose mother is standing and whipping him in front of other people. He picks up the stick he's being hit with because she dropped it and gives it back to her. And Maimonides says that's how much we have to respect our parents. Now, you might sit there saying, okay, sweet and this and that. But let's play psychology on this fellow, okay? His mother was off the rocker. I mean, seriously? We all know dysfunctional moms. How many dysfunctional moms walk in and start hitting their kid in a board meeting in the office? You can imagine the level of dysfunction. So much so that the rabbis are so impressed that they put it in all the Talmuds and all the Midrashim, because they look at it and they see, this is a guy that gets it. What does he get? What is he understanding that I and you are struggling to understand? I want you to think about it. Again, I'm not claiming to have solved all my issues. I'm not claiming to have forgiven every hurt I've had in my childhood from whoever it was. I'm doing this as an intellectual exercise. Again, don't take this personally. If it's uncomfortable for you to go down this route, I get it. We're doing this simply as a learning. Okay, that's the last time I'll bring that caveat. What did he understand? He understood that regardless of whether his mother or father had him by mistake or intentional, whether they loved him or didn't, whether they neglected him or not, they gave him something that nobody else in this world gave him: life. And despite the unbelievable dysfunction that his mother gave him, he was grateful for her for giving him the single biggest gift. Did she hurt him when he was younger? I don't know. I'm playing psychologist for a second. I'd imagine so. Or maybe she just went senile at an old age, but it doesn't make a difference. Here is a guy that obviously had to work on himself. It's not natural to be hit by your mother and say, "Mom!" but rather give the stick back. It's not natural. He obviously had to do an incredible amount of work on himself to show up to that, to show up with such resilience, such faith, such respect. I don't know if you know this, but there happens to be a lot of dysfunctional people in the Bible. People who grew, not they're dysfunctional, their parents are dysfunctional. I'll just give you, for the sake of the, sake of the shir, a few examples. Okay, next page. Noah was born to a very dysfunctional world. I mean, forget about his parents. The entire world was mad, so much so that every other person on the planet was killed besides him and his family. Case number one. Number two, Abraham. Abraham was born to a guy named Terah, who was the second in command, or a general, by the king at the time, a guy named Nimrod. When Terah saw that Abraham was breaking idols and not serving idols and becoming a believer, you know what Terah did? He gave his son over to the king to burn him at the stake. He survived, obviously, a miracle. How many of our fathers threw us in a fire pit? Next, Sarah. Avram marries his niece. I promise you I could go into 20 more details on each. This is just a sampling. Sarah, she was the daughter of Avraham's brother. When Avram was thrown into the furnace, the story goes that his brother Haran, Sarah's dad, was a bit unsure. Do I get involved? Do I not get involved? Do I believe in Avram? Do I not believe in him? He was sitting on the fence. And when he saw that his brother survived, he said, you know what? I'll try it as well. He jumped in and died. And from there you learn, if you sit on the fence too long, your pants get ripped. Okay, so she has a dad who's burnt at the stake. She has a brother, Lot, who we read a lot about, who was quite a menace, quite a character. I mean, the guy ended up moving to Sodom, married a woman that was so witched that she turned into a pillar of salt when she died. Okay, that was her sister-in-law. Fine, let's continue next. They have a child, Isaac, Yitzchak. But Yitzchak has an older brother, a half-brother from Avram, the guy named Ishmael, who drives him bananas even till today. Okay, he's harassed by the guy. We're told that Ishmael used to tease him and make believe as if he's killing him, throw arrows at him. He has a stepmother, Hagar, who doesn't know where she's at because she is Avram's second wife, and he suffers huge issues from his brother, Ishmael. Then, and finally, his father kind of almost sacrifices him on the stake at the Akedah. You remember that story? We'll talk about it on Rosh Hashanah, right? Then he marries Rivka. Rivka was the daughter of Lavan. Lavan is considered one of the biggest enemies of the Jewish people. He drove his kids, he sold his kids for money, then was willing to disown them and even kill them. So much so that when we talk in the Haggadah, we start the story of our torment throughout history. We talk about Arami Oved Avi. There was this Aramean who caused us lots of problems. Who the Aramean? Lavan, who happens to also be, besides he's going to turn into Jacob's father-in-law, this is Rivka's brother. Rivka grows up with Lavan, her brother, and Bethuel, her dad. This is going to turn to Jacob's father-in-law, and also his uncle, who steals everything he has from him. We're told that when Jacob showed up to meet Lavan, his uncle kissed him on both cheeks to see if he was hiding any diamonds. Could you imagine showing up to your uncle's house and they give you a hug? Nothing there. Nothing there. Jacob, besides that, has major issues. He has a twin brother, Esav, seriously dysfunctional. I mean, the guy was killing at the youngest age. Raping, killing, the whole package. Then his brother wants to kill him. He has to run away from his brother. Goes to his uncle, marries his two cousins. His uncle also is trying to deceive him. And that's where he marries his two wives, Rachel and Leah, who grew up with this character, Lavan. You just understand, first of all, it's very entangled, as you could imagine. It's family, real enmeshment. It's a mess. So much so that when Rachel and Leah have to leave their father together with Jacob, they say, we have no issue leaving him. He sold us. He doesn't love us. So pretty much we spoke about every single one of the patriarchs, every single one of the matriarchs. Then there's Joseph, the guy who's sold by his brothers as a slave to Egypt after, that was plan B, because plan A was let's kill him. But plan B, because we're merciful, we're not going to kill our brother, we're going to sell him down the river. And then, of course, there's Moshe, who His mother wasn't dysfunctional. His mother was a great mom, but she had no choice other than to put him on the river, literally. And then he's saved by Batya, grows up in Paro's palace. We're told that at some stage he burnt his tongue. That's a whole story for another time. He grew up in Paro's palace. Eventually, Paro tries to kill him. He has to run away, spends years in Ethiopia or in other random places. Then he shows up to his father-in-law's house. Eventually, his father-in-law puts him in prison for 10 years. I could go on and on and on, but that's not the topic of the shir. What my point is, every single person that you respect in the Bible, in the Torah, lived a dysfunctional childhood, big time. So what's going on over here, friends? Are you telling me that, okay, Afsin got up tonight and all he said was everybody should go mess their kids up. No, you don't have to trust me. You've already done it. No, just kidding. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is, let's think about an assumption that we have that they didn't have. We in the 20th century and the 21st century grow up with an assumption that if you were damaged, then you are damaged. In other words, if damage was done to you, then you're a damaged being. If damage was done to you, then your potential was taken away from you. That the abuser, that the dysfunction made you less than. I'm not justifying abuse, heaven forbid. But I am saying that nobody is forced to believe the narrative that I am less than, because on the contrary, they could take that miserable hurt, that evil that was done to them, and turn into a Moses, turn into a Sarah, turn into a Rivka, turn into Abraham. Each and every one of us has absolute free will what to do with the hurt was done to us. It is a story that we buy, that because someone hurt me, I am less than. I understand why the story is bought. I get it. I really do. No judging. But if there's something we could learn from the founders of our faith, is they didn't buy that story. Avram could have been messed up. His father threw him into a furnace. Moshe could have been so messed up, neglected, grown up in the enemy's house, then being killed. They literally put a knife on his neck and God made a miracle and his neck turned into stone. What did they know? What they knew is that, yes, these events happened to me, but they don't define me. So before we even talk about forgiveness, before that word even enters the table, I'm challenging the fundamental idea of the definition that we believe because hurt was done to me, my potential was taken away from me. And the answer is no, not at all. On the contrary, that might be the birthplace of incredible goodness. That doesn't make the abuser sound good, no. But the fact that it happened to you and you chose to not let it define you, that can make you the person you are. I can only talk about my life. Nobody abused me, thank God. Although I had a counselor who abused half my bunk, sexually abused, in 1995, and did mess up kids' lives, some of them. Some kids, thank God, managed to redeem themselves. Some guys were really affected in a permanent way. Thank God I only showed up the second month to camp, so I never built a relationship with him. And we had teachers who had their own dysfunction, and some students suffered more than others. The one kid who was hung out of the third-story window by his ears, and other stories. I've seen it. I haven't maybe necessarily lived it. I did go through a bit of bullying, etc., but I haven't seen the real abuse. I had somebody reach out to me from the community telling me about sexual abuse they went through over half a century ago and the effect it had on them. But I will say this, friends. It was done and it was evil, but it does not define you. That's the first principle that we can learn from Dama ben Asina, from Avram, from Sarah, from Yitzchak, from Rivka, from Yaakov, from Rachel, from Leah, every single one of them. We are not defined by the childhood we had. Next point. Who runs this world? God. And when we say God runs this world, we say that everything that happens to this world is done by his will. Even the things that were done to us by people who had free choice, once it was done, it was from him, from God. That's why Joseph, when he tells his brothers why he forgives them, he says, Lo atem shlachtem el siyehena. You didn't send me here to Egypt. Ki Elokim, God. But what do you mean, God? 10 brothers, by the freedom of their choice, took him, threw him in a pit, and sold him. What do you mean you didn't send me to Egypt? What he's telling them is you guys have to be accountable to God. You have to ask forgiveness. You have to do tshuva. But you think you sent me to Egypt? That much power you have to change my destiny? That was the plan from a point A. This is where I had to end up. The fact that you guys were the messengers who did that, that's your problem. In today's Chumash, each day there's a chitas, there's a portion of Chumash that we learn. The custom is you split the parsha into the aliyot, and each day of the week you read one aliyah. The 7 aliyot, so you finish it in 1 week. Today, we talk about somebody who falls off a roof in today's Chumash. And we're told that's why you have to make boundaries. Sisa Michael Gagecha, you have to make boundaries around the roof. And the verse uses a very strange word when it says that a person might fall off your roof. They use the expression ki yipoil hanoifel, that the person who falls might fall from your roof. The faller, as in the verb, the person, will fall, the adjective will fall off. Why is he called a faller before he fell? Comes the rabbis and say, comes Rashi from the Talmud, and says he was supposed to fall. That was his destiny. But the fact that it happened on your roof, and the fact that God caused it to happen on your roof, you have to ask yourself why it happened on your watch. In other words, what Rashi says, we give opportunities of merits for those who are meritorious, for those who are in a good space, and we give negative events to people who are in a negative space. And what his argument is, this person was going to fall anyway. The fact that it fell off your roof, you have to go do repentance and ask yourself, why did God allocate it to you? But what's the message here? The message is that guy was going to fall anyway. He didn't fall because there was no gate. He was going to fall anyway. The fact that you have to now go do tshuva, that somebody fell off your roof and make sure it never happens again, that's your problem. But that person's destiny was predetermined. What's the point? The point is nobody messed up our lives. That was the destiny of our life. The fact that that gangster, that mobster, that schmendrick, whatever you want to call him, the fact that that person hurt us is evil. No one's justifying them. But the fact that it happened to me is because that, for some reason, was my destiny. Why God did that way, I don't know. That, again, that no way takes away the evil the person did. That person objectively did wrong. But the fact that was done to me was all predetermined. And that's why the Talmud says very harsh words. The Talmud says, Kol hakoyes, whoever gets angry, in general, whoever gets angry, obviously not the emotion rises, but then, indulges in the emotion. Ke'ilu oived avoda zara. It's as if they are serving idolatry. What? I got angry. I blew my fuse on you for stealing my food at the bracha, and now suddenly I'm an idolater? I mean, that's a bit harsh. And Tanya explains. He says, what is an idolater? An idolater is somebody who says that God might exist, but there's also other gods. There's other beings who are in control of this world. God is not exclusive. Says the Tanya, when you and I get angry, what we're saying is that what happened to us was not from God. Because if I believe that the world, 100% of it is godly, so nothing can happen in this world that's outside God's dominion. So it was supposed to happen. This is a very hard process to go through. I'll say it right now. What I'm saying now is not politically correct. It doesn't feel right. But it's a foundational principle of faith. You don't have to take it from the Tanya. Just think about it. When you say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. God is one. God is one. The word Echad, one, Aleph, Chet in the 7 heavens and in this world, Dalet, the 4 directions. Being a monotheist means you believe that God is everything. There's nothing outside of God. Because if there's anything outside of God, then there's another God there. If God ends here by the abuser, then what's there? Again, this doesn't justify the abuser. That person had free choice, and that person has to ask themselves, how in the world did you do something like that? But the fact that it happened to me, the fact that I was given these parents, I wasn't born, I am saying you weren't born because sperm met the egg and that's why you were born. You were born because God put you into this world. And you couldn't have been born to other parents because that is the DNA and that's the fabric you were born to. So it's not like if only. There is no if only in life. Now you'll sit there saying, Rabbi, what are you talking? You're trying to justify the dysfunction in the world? No. But I am saying we live in a dysfunctional world, and in this dysfunctional world, we're told to make a life for ourselves. But dysfunction done to you does not make you dysfunctional. Whatever hurts we went through in our childhood or in our adulthood was there given to us by God. And we can decide if that makes us stronger or weaker. But there is no what if. It's not if only that never happened. There is no other life. This was the life that was given to me. Is it a pretty life? For some of us, it's prettier than for others. Is it a beautiful life? Some of us, it's more beautiful than others. Is it fair? Some of us, it's more fair than others. But is it my life? Because, so let's go now on the step of forgiveness. What is forgiveness at the fundamental idea? Forgiveness doesn't mean you're a good guy. Oh, you sexually abused me, but you're a good guy. No. You hurt my feelings. Mom, you put me down from day one, but you know what? You're a fantastic mom. That's not what forgiveness means. Forgiveness means I'm sick and tired of what you did to me defining me. You have too much ownership on my life. Not only did you hurt me, you own me 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years later. And I cannot give that to you. Not only did you hurt me, but now you own me. The famous expression that we see that the prophet tells David after he takes Bathsheba. No, it's a different story. Sorry, it's a story with the king Achav who kills somebody and then tries to take their land. Haratzachta v'gam yarashta. You kill and you inherit. You get both. You kill the person and you get the property. When we turn to the person who hurt us in our minds, what we're saying is, Haratzachta, not only did you kill me, you hurt me. Gam yarashta, you're also going to conquer me? You're also going to own me? Never. What you did was terrible. For some things that you've done, you might even have to go to prison. I'm talking to the abuser. It's despicable. You have to fall on all fours and ask forgiveness. But the fact that you're not asking for forgiveness, or the fact that you're asking for forgiveness and you don't deserve it, I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because I cannot be defined anymore by this. I'm so much more than this. We live in an era that often we get defined by the exclusive things that happen to us, by the uniqueness. So for example, if somebody's dark-skinned in a group of light-skinned people, they're labeled dark-skinned. If someone's gay and everybody else is straight, they're the gay person. Whatever, some person is deformed or disabled, they're the disabled person. We always define people, subconsciously or consciously, by the thing that makes them different. And that's a modern shtick. In other words, it's a relatively modern idea, and that is you defined what, if you have something that makes you really different, that's all we'll see in you. So what we do is often we also say the same things about events that happen to us in our life. That event defined me. Yes, it changed us. Of course, these things change us. But define us? Make us? Chart our destiny? Never. The founders of our faith teach us by the dysfunction they lived that any person can redeem themselves regardless of what they've went through. I think, and I've spoken about this very often, so I'm not going to sit on it for more than a few seconds. I think about what our grandparents went through, what my grandparents went through, great-grandparents. The evil that was perpetrated on them, maybe not by loved ones, whether it was Nazis, whether it was communists, whether it was the Tsar. I think of Jewish history. As a nation, the amount of dysfunction that was done to us, the amount of disgusting, despicable acts that were done to us. And yet we were never defined by that, friends. Never. Never. Today, we live in an era that we focus a lot on function, dysfunction. We go to a lot of lectures about dysfunctional parenting, functional parenting. And very often, we actually start convincing, not always, okay, there's certain people that were really damaged. I'll talk about myself. I went through a phase when I was reading all the parenting books and all the guidance books and all the self-esteem books. And suddenly I realized I messed up. I didn't know that till then. I mean, my mom's a good mom. My dad was a good dad. Nobody's perfect, but better than I'm being to my kids by a million miles. And I suddenly discovered I'm really messed up. And boy, did I give my parents a run through. You messed me up. I suddenly discovered how messed up I am. And that happens because we live in an era that, like, you focus on, don't scream at your kids, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, the 50 commandments of parenting, the 100 commandments of marriage. And that's a lecture I gave a few weeks ago why I'm so anti these courses in the self-help, because it also convinces us we're more messed up than we are. Again, I'm not talking about real dysfunction. I'm talking about basic lives. Imperfect parenting, which is pretty much everyone. Let's continue in the PowerPoint. Three levels of forgiveness that I want you to walk out with tonight. This is from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He gave this in an essay on the Parsha of Chukat. Fascinating essay, originally in Yiddish. Here are the three levels. Very straightforward. But when I told you at the beginning of the class that we're going to be more subtle than just saying forgive, this is what I meant. The lowest level of forgiveness to somebody is, I don't like you. I don't even forgive you. I just wish you no harm. As in, you the abuser. Another way of putting it is, I don't like you. I forgive the deed. In other words, I don't want you to go through what I went through. I don't need that to happen. I don't need you to get beat. Obviously, if the person's a menace to society, if the person's an abuser, they have to be arrested. I'm not saying that. I'm saying somebody did something, they were a bad parent to you. They're not a threat to society. The first level of forgiveness is, I have nothing to do with you. I don't want anything to do, but I also don't wish you any harm. I'm not waiting for the other shoe to drop on your head. I'm not waiting for you to get punished. Have a good life. Get out of my life. I don't want to have anything to do with you. No relationship. Wish you well. God bless. Sei mir gesund. That is a level of forgiveness, believe it or not. And I believe that most people are capable of this level. Even if there's deep anger at the person, fine, you know what, have a happy life. I couldn't care less. You should have nachas from your kids, have parnasa, Zeimer gesund. And that is a level. And I do think that if we appreciate that, most of us would agree that this isn't impossible on the most part. Then there's a higher level, forgiving the person. I'm not your buddy. I'm not your friend. But I don't think negative thoughts about you. I can't control what my heart feels. And that's one thing I have to clarify. When the Torah says forgive somebody, the Torah doesn't tell you what to feel, because that's a feeling. That's who you are. What the Torah is saying is when that feeling arises within you, don't indulge it. When that hurt comes up and you feel that pinch in your chest, just bring it back down. Don't let it float up to your mind. Let it go back. Settle. Don't indulge in it. And that's the second level. The second level is forgive the person. I have no anger to you. I'll be civil to you. And I'm even gonna, unlike the first level where I want nothing to do with you and I just forgive the deed, I forgive you. I forgive you. I don't forget, but I forgive. I don't forget, but I forgive. And now we could have a civil and even respectful relationship. We could show up to each other's simchas. And I will do my best to not feel negative thoughts about you, or at least indulge in them. That's level 2. And then there's level 3, which is the hardest. And that is restore the relationship to where it was before the hurt, or to where it never was, but restore it back to perfection. The deed, everything is wiped out. Clean with you. Not only do I wish you well, I pray for your wealth. I pray for you. I love you. It is absolutely a non-issue between us. It's gone. And I'm sure each and every one of us has at times in our life had this level as well. Not necessarily to the serious hurt we've been through, but to some. A person, one time, you had a good friend, and one time they broke your trust, but it wasn't a massive event. You were hurt. You told them you really gave it to them. And actually, according to halakha, if somebody hurts you and you're struggling to forgive, you have to actually tell them, you hurt me, you know that? Because how else are they ever going to ask forgiveness? Some people, you should have known what I was feeling like. No, I didn't. So according to Torah, if the person doesn't know that they hurt you, then you actually have to tell them. But sometimes after that, you walk over and say, you know what, honey, we've been friends forever, 20 years together, 50 years. Yeah, that was a mishap, bad moment, but honestly, we're clear. Never happened, relationship's back. I will not break the trust I've had with you 50 years over one event. But then there's other times that it's over. Like the first or second level. Honey, it was good knowing you. I'll still show up. I'll wish you mazel tov when you have a granddaughter. But this relationship is gone. The red line was crossed. It's over. There's no restoration. And Torah doesn't say you always have to hit this level. It's an aspiration, but sometimes the person is too dysfunctional. And even restoring means with distance. So let me clarify this point. Nobody's saying you have to walk over to your abuser and sit there saying, let's have the relationship again. No. If that person hurt you and is continuing to hurt you, stay away. Get the person arrested, whatever's done. No one's saying be a step over. Obviously, if it's like Dama Ben Nesina with the mother, but even then, I'm sure you had boundaries. I don't think Dama Nesina went every single day to get hit by his mom. She happened to show up to a public gathering. She whacked him in the face, and he stood up and was a man about it. No one's saying a person has to not have boundaries. But the intention has to be to heal, not them. Heal me. I've known too many people who lived with grudges for a long time at their parents, at their sibling, at their former boss. It destroys people. They can't stop talking about it. And they're justified. They'll sit there saying, my ex-brother or my ex-sister or my ex-parent, they'll say it But you can see the fact that they're saying it and they can't stop talking about it, it's on their mind constantly. We're punishing ourselves, friends. No one's saying be best buddies again. You and your sister, you and your brother had a fallout. I get it. They broke your trust. I get it. So don't trust them again. But don't hate them either. They don't you don't deserve it. Forget about what they deserve. You don't deserve it. They don't deserve to have such a hold on us. Nobody does. Now you can ask me the question, but what if they never asked for forgiveness? How could I ask forgiveness for a person who didn't even say I'm sorry? Because again, it has nothing to do with that. The Torah tells us, it's a commandment in the Torah, bear no grudge. Obviously, a feeling's a feeling, but don't indulge that feeling. It's one of the 613 mitzvahs. Don't hold a grudge. Don't take revenge and don't hold a grudge. And the same Torah who told us Shabbos and kosher and bris told us don't hold a grudge. Do not hate, the Torah tells us. Do not hate your brother. But often you hear the reason that you should forgive people is, but they did their best. I want to talk about that for a moment. I don't buy it. They didn't. Not everyone does their best. Like, I don't buy that philosophy personally. Like, shame, your parents did the best under this. No, they didn't. They could have done better very often. Could have read another book. They could have bit their tongue every time they got angry. So that's not why you're forgiving them, because they did their best. I personally find that argument very weak. You could disagree with me. I find that petty. The reason we forgive is because I want to live my best. Because you did your best or didn't do your best. It's nothing to do with you. I want to be my best. I only get to live once. And I don't want to have to ask forgiveness from a stone or have to forgive a stone in a graveyard. I want to live now. I want it out now. And if that person is so weak in character that they can't even ask forgiveness, then my mercy for them is even greater. Because there's a great insight the Kabbalists tell us that the best way to develop forgiveness and love is through mercy. Rachmanis mevatelas asasina. Mercy takes away the hatred. Why? How miserable of a person can the person be that they can't even take ownership for the thing? What kind of weak character? Hurt people. How hurt must they have been to do that to me? That doesn't justify what they did. But at least it gets me to see their feeble humanity, their brokenness. And I'm able to even develop empathy for that person, that parent, or that other individual who definitely didn't do their best. They could have done a much better job. You couldn't even ask forgiveness. That's the person who deserves most forgiveness. Not because they're good, but because you're going to allow that lowlife, that weak character to have ownership on you, that person who's so weak that they cannot take ownership. Because let me say this straight out. Healthy people don't hurt people. No normal parent, when I say normal, I mean of healthy mind, healthy body, will hurt their kid intentionally. Those people do their best. But if you grew up with a dysfunctional person, it is not coming from a place of health. Doesn't justify it. But a healthy person cannot tell their child, I wish I never had you. You're a mistake. I don't care who takes care of you. I don't care if you have food on the table. That dysfunction cannot come from a place of health. And sometimes we judge the dysfunctional person as if they were healthy, and then we ask them why. Why did you do that to me? But they weren't healthy. They were mad. It's madness. We say in the davening on Yom Kippur, like the mercy of a father to a child, or like the mercy of a mother to a child. It's natural, it's within the DNA for parents to be functional. Nobody normal does these things. And the sad thing is that their evil or their madness was so big that they took an innocent child who doesn't have any other outlet. All they have is their mom and dad, and hurt them. I was reading an article just before I came on. I was trying to do as much research before I come on, just to be able to, really get into the space and come from a place of empathy, not judgment. And I was reading the story about this girl who grew up with parents who never took care of her, never gave her food, absolute neglect. And thank God for the local pizza guy who just gave her free meals, etc., etc. And she describes like a really, really dysfunctional childhood. For 2 years, she used to sleep at an old lady because the old lady paid her parents so that she should have somebody to sleep by her, this young girl. And she would literally verbally abuse this girl all the time she was there, and then send her out in the morning, and she would have to walk at 7 in the morning in the freezing cold back to her house and then go to school. And she writes about her journey towards forgiveness. She doesn't paint her parents as a rosy-eyed, but the dysfunction. She develops an empathy for how miserable they must have been inside to do that. Sometimes the hurt that was done to us is irreversible, physically, physiologically, emotionally. But if I can accept in some way, without justifying the abuser, because I cannot be going on the record even remotely doing that, heaven forbid. If I can then believe that I'm still living the life that was determined for me, and I could still have a beautiful life, albeit a different beauty than maybe what I fantasized about, a different beauty what I imagined. But if I can believe that my life, the way it was, with the struggles that I've been born with, or that have been nurtured, because it's interesting, and this is one final thought I'll develop, and then we'll wrap it up for the night. Some people are born with physical disabilities, mental disabilities. And some of us are born with no disabilities, but those disabilities come to us later in life, not through nature, through nurture. So why is it that we have a much easier time accepting disabilities of nature than of nurture? Because the answer is, because nature, God did it. Nurture was done to us by another person. I was an innocent, beautiful child. I had everything going for me, and you messed me up. But the same God who gave you nature gave you the nurture, gave you those parents, no? Does that make God right? No, I'm not God's lawyer. But knowing it comes from God, can it bring a bit of comfort? For me, it does. I don't know what it will do for you. And I'll finish with this. As we're getting closer to Yom Kippur, 3.5 weeks from Rosh Hashanah, 5 weeks from Yom Kippur, 5 weeks minus a day. Let's try. If we're not ready to forgive somebody really dysfunctional or the most hurtful person in our life, leave it for the meanwhile. But let's try to forgive somebody. We can't sit with this hatred. It's killing us. It's killing us. The amount of faribbles, the amount of children who don't talk to parents, siblings who don't talk to each other. It's a himul geshrei. And it's often justified. No one's judging the justification. But it's not natural. And it will cause us so much pain. And we have the free choice what to do with that pain. I bless us all, first and foremost, myself and you, with the courage to find forgiveness. And if not forgiveness for their sake, at least for our sake. And if we're not ready to forgive, at least not to wish them the worst. And just believe with all our heart and all our mind that we are living the life that was designed for us, and that our life is absolutely